it appears that corporate media might be starting to catch on about money in politics. So now, of all places, CNBC out with a new article that talks about Joe Manchin getting massive donations of corporate money ahead of the decision to kill Build Back Better, which was, of course, Joe Biden's $1.7 to $2 trillion spending plan of human infrastructure. So now the report states that Manchin, his leadership PAC called Country Roads, oh yeah, well, they're going to take him home, all right, right to the bank, received 17 different contributions from corporations in October and 19 just last month, according to a CNBC analysis of FEC Commission filings. None of the 4 months prior to October saw as many corporate contributions. Gee, I wonder what he was doing in that time. What was he doing during that time, before this? And then what was he doing in October and November to get so much corporate donations? I don't know. What was he saying? Was he trying to water down and destroy Biden's human infrastructure agenda? No, it couldn't be. Oh, couldn't be. Oh, wait, it is. Now, the White House had unveiled its framework for the bill, dubbed Build Back Better, in October, included about $550 billion to battle climate change by investing in green technologies, writes CNBC. Manchin, a conservative Democrat who has profited from his links to the coal industry, opposed key climate provisions in the legislation. So far, true. And again, CNBC. What would be even more surprising if it were written in the Wall Street Journal? Now, where's Washington Post, New York Times? I don't know about that. And forget cable news. But now, more information from the report. In November, the Country Roads PAC received corporate contributions ranging from $2,500 to $5,000. Donors included financial giants such as American Express and Goldman Sachs, aerospace and defense leader Lockheed Martin, health insurance companies United Health Group and Blue Cross Blue Shield, and natural gas company CNX Resources. The PAC raised over $110,000 in November. Country Roads also raised over $150,000 in October from corporate donors such as Verizon, Union Pacific, Wells Fargo, and PACs tied to the coal and mining industries. Manchin, a conservative Democrat, represents West Virginia, which overwhelmingly voted for President Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020. The state is a key location for the fossil fuel industry. So now, of course, they don't necessarily mention the corruption component of this, but again, that's asking too much of corporate media, how the donations make it corrupt. But without coming out with that insinuation, if you read the article, it's obvious that the donations from these corporations to this PAC absolutely led him to voting to kill Build Back Better. Or not even voting, because there wasn't even a vote, but just saying, no, I'm not going to vote for it. All right, so now they also added this. Corporations, business leaders, and outside groups have pressured Manchin to oppose key parts of the Democratic administration's agenda ever since his party gained a slight majority in the Senate following the 2020 election. The Koch network, for example, has lobbied Manchin to oppose key elements of the legislation, the climate change stuff, while billionaires such as Nelson Peltz and Ken Langone have cheered him on as he moved against his own party. Langone said he plans to host a fundraising event for the West Virginia lawmaker who is running for re-election in 2024. Jonathan Cott, who once worked for Manchin as a communications advisor and is now a lobbyist, gave $2,500 to Manchin's leadership PAC at the end of November. Cott started lobbying for energy giant ExxonMobil in the third quarter after he was hired by Capitol Council earlier this year. So all of that money. Now, what did Joe Manchin spend the money on? Well, some of it, of course, went to his political coffers, to run his political campaign. But a pretty big chunk of that just went to hotels and travel, as they explain. In November, the leadership PAC spent over $40,000 at the Greenbrier, a luxury resort in West Virginia, which is owned by the family of Republican Governor Jim Justice. who was formerly a Democrat, by the way. The November FEC filing says the money was used for catering, lodging, food, and beverages. In October, the PAC spent over $1,000 on travel for Manchin's son, Joe Manchin IV, according to that month's filing. The Intercept also reported that Manchin's son has leadership roles at the companies with ties to the West Virginia lawmaker. Of course, the Intercept had reported, if you go into depth into that report, that the companies that Manchin had founded were turned over to his son, but that Manchin still has investments and stock in many of those companies, making up to about $4.5 million during his since he had been in the Senate. So that's a lot of money. In fact, he makes almost $500,000 a year in just in those stocks. And so investment. All right. Now there's more. Let's see. The PAC also spent another $1,000 to Sawgrass Marriott, a golf resort in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, and over $2,000 on catering an event at RPM Italian, a restaurant in Washington, D.C. The PAC also spent just over $10,000 that month as a deposit for another event at the Greenbrier. They really, really like the Greenbrier. I bet it's very, very nice. But who's got $40,000? Not I, not you and I. So, we don't have that money. But he does. Now, the purpose of the thousands of dollars spent at hotels, meals, and travel, they say, is unclear. Is it, though? I mean, is it really unclear? And again, this is where they just failed to make that very, very essential connection. No, these corporations pulled together and gave him and his son bribes. That's it. Which then Joe Manchin used to go have fancy dinners, stay in nice hotels, and go golfing. That's what it is. And by the way, this is entirely legal. And how? How is it legal? It's because the same politicians that are getting paid deregulated and allowed corporate donations, along with the Supreme Court, of course, that basically allowed these companies and the rich to take over our government, to do corporate capture. And so now we're in a situation where you have billions of dollars pouring in from corporations to all of our, almost all of our politicians, and we're living under corporate rule. Now, CNBC also then explains that while leadership PACs are meant to help fund candidates running for office, a report from some nonprofit organizations says it appears that many lawmakers simply use the money at fancy resorts and restaurants, which again is exactly what they were doing. In fact, the report says this. Instead, such spending patterns give the impression that some politicians are simply raising money at one posh location to pay for the next fundraiser at the next fancy destination, creating an endless fundraising cycle at luxurious restaurants and resorts, much of which is paid for by special interest money, with no cost to lawmakers' own pocketbooks. Corruption. It's the corruption, and it's right in our face. That's why he killed Build Back Better. The corporations didn't want Build Back Better. They said, no, we don't want you to have paid time off. We don't want to have old people get hearing care. We don't want to have these investments in things to stymie climate change. No, we don't want any of that. We don't want anything that's going to impact our bottom line. We don't want to pay any more in taxes. And by the way, we want workers desperate and to accept any sort of scraps that we offer them. That's what we want. To keep labor costs low and to have no regulations so we can dump our trash, our garbage, our pollution, wherever the hell we want without big government coming and telling us that we can't poison your water. That's what they want. That's what they want. And that's what they've been trying to do. And that's what they pay people like Joe Manchin to allow them to do. And by the way, Joe Manchin, as I mentioned before, has personal stake in this. Build Back Better would have actually targeted some of his precious income from fossil fuel investments, as well as, of course, hurt the donors. Now, the people in West Virginia, however, they're now hurt as a result of this, as a result of him saying no. And now he goes on and says, well, I care about the people of West Virginia, and I would have to go home and I'd have to explain to them why I voted for Build Back Better. No, you might want to go home and explain why you voted against some of the most incredibly popular policies, according to West Virginians. Look, a majority of West Virginia voters support Build Back Better. 68%. And that was, by the way, that was a $3.5 trillion plan. Even a majority of Republicans, 56%. So, come on. The people want it, but the bosses don't. And that's who runs the show. The miners themselves, by the way, the coal miners, the coal unions, they're like, yes, Build Back Better, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. But the bosses said no. And Joe Manchin is paid by the bosses, by the big corporations. And so, again, the only people that this bill is not popular with are the corrupt and the corruptors. That's how it works in Washington. And by the way, the media is so close, but just fails to openly say that connection, to say that Joe Manchin is corrupt and that the system itself allows said corruption. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.